Hi, ladies. Nice to see you. I hope you are well wherever it is that this message finds you in the world, in the country. It's Friday where I am, Friday evening. I usually don't do these Friday evening, but I thought maybe I would catch a few of you at an unusual time to meet. I know some people aren't doing much, so I thought I might take the opportunity to talk a little bit about relationships and marriage and COVID and lockdowns and the sort of crazy time that many of us have been experiencing this last almost year, hard to imagine. I had several questions come in, so I'm going to address the questions that came in from the folks who sent them. So thank you to those of you who sent them over. Here's what I'm hearing a lot of. I'm hearing a lot of women who are saying things like, it's been a terrible year in so many ways, but it's been really good in ways that have been unexpected. So more time with family, more time with kids, less on the to-do list. And I've had a lot of women say to me, I actually feel bad that I feel so good, even though obviously there are all the things happening in the world. So that withstanding, right? And so that's one thing that I've been hearing a lot. So if you're one of those women who find yourself where you're in a place where you're like, I'm actually doing really good, that's great. Like, good for you. And you're not alone. There are a lot of people who are, their parts of their life are going really well. The other thing that I'm hearing a lot of is that, especially as this time goes on, and excuse me, there becomes so many opportunities to be polarized in your relationship. You know, I think when this started, depending on where you live and, you know, what your work situation is and whether you have to leave the house or not, I heard this early on in March where some people wanted their partners to like disrobe when they came into the house and make sure to shower so that they didn't bring in any potential virus particles into the home or the children. And so there was real difference in how it is that you handle kind of hygiene and cleanliness around potential dangers. And as this has continued, now there's so much more to be divided around, right? It's not just whether you wash your groceries or not. Then it's if you mask or not. Then it's politics, who you voted for. Then now it's vaccines. So there are so many different places where we are being invited to divide ourselves with our partner. And Colleen had written in that, you know, just sort of regular life already had enough. And now we have all these other pieces on top of it, which I completely understand. And it is something that I'm hearing from so many women and men too, even though I don't work with men so much anymore, but certainly in my community of men, I hear that as well. And I think in terms of, Colleen, to address your question about how to put it all together, so how to put in all the pieces of just your regular life where there might be some disconnect or distance between the two of you, and now you have layered in so much, you know, else. I think one of the pieces that's really important to remember, and I talk about this sometimes here in this Facebook space, is that it's really important to pay attention to what energy frequency you're finding yourself in. Because if we're in the energy frequency of fear, biologically, it is going to be incredibly difficult for you to access the part of your brain that can access creativity, understanding, empathy, compassion. So if I'm activated with fear, which many people are right now, right? Like, it's very typical right now to feel that sense of fear. So if you are activated in the sense of fear, it will shut down, and this happens functionally, right? Because if I'm scared, I need to get safe. And so I shut down all of those thinking pathways that might open me to creativity, compassion, connection. And because so many people are in a state of fear right now, And it might be low level fear, but their anxiety is definitely up for sure. And many of us were anxious to begin with, right? So it's really important to be aware that if you are feeling afraid, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to open yourself to curiosity, to understanding, to creativity. How do we come up with a solution for this? So the first thing, Colleen, as it pertains to putting it all together, is getting yourself out of fear. It doesn't mean that we don't make good decisions. We get to still be discerning. We still get to, assess what's happening in our situation and make choices for our health, our family, whatever it is that we need to do. And we can do that without engaging in fear. Okay, so that's number one. And with that comes remembering that number one, you always must love yourself first. You know, in airplanes, when they say put your mask on first, right? Before you can tend to somebody else, you have to take care of yourself first, which means, the women who I mentor know it is a non-negotiable that they're doing certain practices to anchor themselves, to ground themselves every single day, especially right now, because right now it is game freaking on. If we want to walk in the world amongst everybody else, or at least in our homes, amongst whomever we live with in our homes, it is really important that we anchor in something that's not outside of us. Because if you're trying to anchor in whatever certainty you think might be outside of you, I think if we got one message the last 10 months, it's that there's nothing certain outside of us. And I don't say that as like a scary thing. It's actually a really amazing thing that we're recognizing that, because it's inviting all of us to come back home. What is it that you can be certain about, right? And the certainty that I know is how it is that I show up and how I think, how I feel, and what I do. I can be 1000% certain because I'm in charge of that. I'm not in charge of anything else. And so that stuff comes up and down, and it goes in ways that I maybe don't agree with, but that's none of my business. My business is taking care of this, and then how it is that I show up with my family, with the women who I mentor, with my community, with my neighbors, right? So making your self daily practices priority, that's a non-negotiable in my world. And thank you for whoever said that I'm pretty. I look pretty. Thank you. I can't see your name on this thing, but I will look in Facebook and see who you are. And thank you so much. I appreciate that. Debbie wrote in about variety, and so many people are really wanting variety right now because it's like Groundhog Day, and date night snuggling on the couch gets sort of old. And so it requires us to get creative. And what I might suggest that you do, Debbie, is make a list of, 10 things, and have your partner make a list of 10 things that would be fun within the realm of whatever your limits are because of your community or level of personal safety, whatever. And then you choose something off those menus. Like you could, do a picnic on the floor with candles and your favorite beverages, and read poetry to each other. Like there are all kinds of things that we normally don't do because it's like, oh, have a glass of wine watching YouTube or watching Netflix, whatever it might be. And so find other things, which requires you to be really creative, right? Trade foot rubs, take a bath together, read your list, Debbie, of the 50 things that you love about him. That's one of the things that we do in my mentorship program. Read the 50 things that you love about yourself, right, to him. There are so many ways that we can get creative, and I think that many of us are being invited to do a lot of that this last 10 months, whether it's learning an instrument, a new language, whatever it might be, a skill, bringing some of that into your relationship as well, starting a book club with your partner and reading a chapter at a time. One of the things that I suggest to some of the women who I'm working with, if they're interested in amping up the intimacy in their partnership, if they feel so called and interested to read erotica together with their partner. So to find some erotica that really works for them and to read that out loud. So there are lots of ways within the confines of your home that you can do that. Jessica had a comment about never being able to be alone. Well, you have a lot of kids at home, Jessica, I know. And so having alone time is maybe something that's rare for you. So I think, again, it's about really creating that space within the confines of what you have. So it might be that you have a particular blanket or something that you put on the floor, and your kids know that when mom's on her red blanket, it's like she's not here. It's her invisible time. So you get your 20 minutes without the kids or without your partner coming in to the space. And so we have to train our families and ourselves to take that time, because it's really easy. You know, I work from home and it's really easy to get distracted, like, oh, this needs to be done or that needs to be done. And then we never get alone time, but it's important that we prioritize that. That goes back to what Colleen's question and my response to her, to remember that self-love, your time, even if it's just in the bathroom, you know, for 20 minutes, having the door shut, and you just having that time alone, and also not filling up that time with social media scrolling, right? Like right now, do not be social media scrolling. Like, be very intentional if you're going to consume something in social media. Like, have a really clear intention so that you're not spending 10 valuable minutes just going through your phone. Diane, and this is Diane, and we had Susan also send in about this, and Kaylee, about having real differences politically with their partners. So I got a lot of this, where one person is more right, and one person's more left, and that as this continues and the way that it continues, that the divide is growing bigger and bigger. So here's the thing. You know how in here we talk about how your relationship is your ashram. This moment is a big ashram for all of us. And there's something here I believe that we need to learn. And it's been true in our marriages, in our committed relationships, and now it's true in a really big way on a global scale. And it's how it is that we find connection through difference. The thing that's so challenging right now is that difference feels like it's life or death. And maybe it is life or death, depending on what your perspective is, right? But that kicks up that fear. And so if for me, the difference feels like life or death, now I'm activated in that state of fear. Remember at the top of this video, I talked about, if you're in that heightened state of fear, I can't access curiosity. I can't access creativity, compassion, empathy, right? Because I'm scared, and that gets me going. And so now my vision is getting very myopic on what I believe and what I think you should believe, right? And again, I'm not here to say what side, and it's not about that. What's so cool about how I've worked professionally for the last 20 years is I have spent 20 years sitting in rooms with people who are polarized around sex, around money, around family, around religion, around how they raise their kids, around if they stay in one city or move to another city. Like, that's been the name of the game in my world for 20 years. Now it's just in a really big global scale, and it feels like, or maybe is, I don't know, the stakes are really high. And so what I know is that what I've been practicing and doing for 20 years can be applied to what's happening on a global scale right now. But when we're in a state of fear, which is exactly what I have taught my clients, when you're in an activated state of fear, you are not going to be able to find connection, curiosity, empathy. You can't, because everything is going to be heightened. And so then, just like in my couples counseling sessions in those rooms, I would say to the couple, we have to get you into a space where you're grounded, where you're rooted, maybe where you don't feel like you love the other person or you're thrilled that you're married to them, but to get yourself in a place where you're soothed enough and you can remember where and how it is that you have connection, where and how it is that this other person across the couch from me is human too and is working to get their needs met, which can feel really hard when you're doing affair recovery work. which can feel really hard when you're talking about mismatch in sexual desire that's gone on for a decade or more, right? Because there's so much anger, there's so much fear, there's so much hurt. And it's really similar to what is happening now. There's so much anger, there's so much fear, and there's so much hurt for good reason, right? It's not about brushing that away, just like it wasn't about brushing that away, sitting with a couple when somebody hadn't experienced an affair. We have to feel our feelings. That's part of being human. It's the big get to. How do I feel my feelings and still decide on what emotional state I want to broadcast, decide on how it is that I want to show up with my thinking and my feeling and my doing, decide how I want to contribute to this conversation with my voice, with my heart. Because if I'm in a state of fear, it makes it hard to decide because I'm so activated that I'm going to be trying to control or poke the other person, right? And, you know, some of you have said, you know, have really strong feelings. Obviously, all of us maybe have strong feelings about our particular side. And when you have strong feelings about your particular side with your partner, likely what you're doing in your head, and you can go back and read some of my posts in this space. This whole week I've been posting about communication because this is up, ladies, and it's something that we have to build mastery in because I don't think that things are going to change, right? Like situationally anytime soon, like in the next 2 weeks and probably not the next 2 months. And we don't know after that, right? And so we have to get really good at how it is that I'm going to communicate through difference. And if I'm spending the whole day building my rebuttal to my partner, building my case against my partner, it is not going to go well because I'm now inviting them to battle. And this is your person. And for some of us, you are cloistered in a house with this person. So probably not a great idea to go on attack with each other. And so how is it that you practice higher level emotions? Doesn't mean that you don't get to have your perspective or your opinion or your beliefs, right? I still get to have my knowing, and you get to have your knowing that's different from me. But notice the questions that will come up in your head, because women say this to me all the time. But Jenny, how could somebody believe, right? How could he reads all these things. I think he's a conspiracy theorist. Well, how does somebody not see, right? All of that energy, right? You can feel the judgment there. And it's not that I'm not compassionate. It's not that I don't understand. I do. It's because I do understand. And I know that if those are the questions that you're asking yourself, what you're doing is you're parking yourself in an identity of you being right and them being wrong. And maybe you are right. I don't know. And what if you were to practice being right and accepting that they believe their wrong belief? Okay, whatever. You get to be right and they get to be wrong. And you don't need to have all of the emotional charge around it because you just have your different beliefs. That requires you, though, to be in a different identity, right? An identity of a woman who is standing in her knowing, can have her feelings, maybe her sadness or her grief that her partner believes something different, without that tripping up her emotional state. That's higher level mastery. That is not something that adolescents can do, and it's not something that most grown-ups can do. And it's certainly not something that a lot of professionals, you know, I used to make this joke, and now I can't really make this joke because I'll get, I don't know, in trouble for it. But I used to say in my couples therapy sessions, like, what you are doing, couple, husband and wife, in this particular meeting, what you're doing, you know, in your partnership, two partners together, is you're trying to cross the aisle with each other, which is what people in politics, wouldn't we want the Republicans and Democrats to do that? So I used to say that in my office all the time. Like, that's what they're supposed to be doing, is getting curious about each other. I don't even feel like I can say that anymore because now that's like a really politically charged maybe thing to even say. When before it was like, yeah, that made a lot of sense. Like the people who are running the country should maybe listen to each other in order to take into account all the different beliefs and practices and faiths and perspectives and all the things, because we're all very, very different, right? So I don't know that I can make that joke anymore. We'll see if I can or not. But at any rate, you get what I mean. You chose this person. The person that you're with, you chose them. And little did you know they came with all the things that they came with. And now you're finding yourself sort of stranded on a desert island with them. So how do you want to move forward with that? Being in the highest version of yourself. In my world, the highest version of yourself does not come with belittling somebody, judgment, shame. I don't believe that that is where it is that we should be holding the bar as humans for each other. And that requires, though, us to do some of our own work and get creative and be self-reflective and consider, how is it that I show up in this situation? Because this is what I've chosen. This is where I'm at. And so what am I being called to do and to be in this moment? And for those of you who have any kind of spiritual or religious practice at all, now would be your moment to really pull that forward. And so if you have a practice around love, around acceptance, maybe utilizing some of that. And what does that really look like? To me, in my world, love is a verb. Love is a verb. And so you do love. I don't care how long you've been married to somebody. If you say, oh my gosh, I love them, how are you doing love with them? How do you treat them? How do you think about them? What do you say to them? What's the feeling that you're broadcasting to them? That's what love is, right? That's what love is. And so if you're a practitioner of love, right, if that's part of your spiritual or your religious beliefs, then start doing that. And that doesn't mean that you're a doormat. You're not a doormat. Any of you who are in my Facebook group, you know, none of this is about you being a doormat. You get to be well-defined. You get to have boundaries. You get to be rooted and grounded. You get to be clear and intentional about who you are and who you are not. And if you pick up the mantle, you can also do that with so much love. Love that is fierce and that is clear, but is not tearing somebody else down. Especially your partner, especially if you're co-parenting, right? And that's what I believe we're being called to do in this really unusual, I used to say it's a moment, it's not a moment, now it's an era. It's a really unusual era that we're in. And so I look at it as a classroom. What are we being called to do? Who are we being invited to be? It's one of the questions I ask the women who I'm mentoring. You know, we talk about moving from your 1.0 to your 2.0 self. And they create a lot of questions. We ask a lot of questions to get you to that 2.0 state. And one of them is, who am I being called to be, right? What's the higher or highest version of myself in this particular moment? Who's that lady? How does she show up? How does she talk, walk, think? What would she be feeling right now? What would she be asking herself? Because she probably wouldn't be asking herself, can you believe he thinks that way? Because that will march you right back down to this other place. So this is our year of mastery, as far as I'm concerned. And we are waist deep in the trenches. It is the year to say yes to yourself in such a big way, because there is going to be so much pulling your attention off of you. Right? It was similar in couples counseling. Whenever couples would come in with this like blazing fire problem and they're looking at that, I'm looking at what they're not looking at. So right now, as the whole world is looking at whatever it's looking at, what are you not looking at? And if you're not looking at your relationship with yourself, if you're not looking at your daily practices, if you're not looking at how it is you're showing up, if you're not looking at your family unit, if you're not looking at the things that are really important to you, you just gave all of your power to the big, shiny fire, bonfire that's happening. Not that we shouldn't attend to that. We can absolutely attend to that, but what's your priority? For me, one of my priorities is helping women who are interested and committed in becoming the highest version of themselves, because I know when a woman becomes the highest version of herself, there are 25 people that she's going to impact that are close to her. Her children, her partner, her best friends, her community, her colleagues. The ripple of impact is huge. All I need is one woman. And then if I have 5 or 10 or 15 or 100, isn't that amazing? And their ripple of impact is huge because they're not showing up anymore in a state of fear or shame or judgment of themselves, right? Or of others, because we give others what we have for ourselves. So I give judgment if I have judgment for me. If I'm hard on myself, I'm going to be hard on my partner. And so the women who work with me, they want to live in a higher frequency. Doesn't mean that they're a doormat. It means that they're discerning, that they've decided, that they're aware, they're alert. They know that they are here in this classroom, in this ashram to grow. And it's game on time. And right now, it's super game on time because what's happening out here is going to distract you. Right? And when you're distracted, the first thing that we do, especially if you're busy and you're a mother and you have a lot happening, is you stop looking at yourself and you start looking outside and you say, well, maybe another time. There's no time but now. There's no time but now. And so focus on what matters the most. Stop building a team against anybody. We are all different. You and your partner are different. And the more I want to make somebody wrong, the more I'm creating a divide that at some point will have to be repaired. It will have to be repaired. It never would be of service if I had a couple come in and if I had judgment because somebody had an affair, and if I aligned with the partner who was hurt and said, oh my gosh, I cannot believe she had an affair on you. How could she do that? That's terrible. If I had that internal judgment or externally had that, right? How in the world would I ever pull them back together, right? Once we sort of got through the affair piece, because I've already like seeded these beliefs that they're wrong, right? And so we have to think about that right now. All of these, the internal places, because I know we all have our own perspective, but the more I make my mother, my sister, my best friend, my neighbor, my whoever wrong, we're going to have to repair that on the back end somewhere, right? It's part of looking further than just right now, my mood. Looking down the road and saying, okay, if I'm going to have to repair this relationship later, it's probably a good idea if I'm not nursing on this belief that they're wrong, right? So notice that. Notice that. So good to see you all. The sun's going down and it's getting dark in my office. And can I just tell you, those of you, someone just wrote in, I can't see your name. I'll see it when I stop the video, that my hair looks nice. It's so funny. People who know me, I just started wearing makeup. Like I am not a hair or makeup sort of person. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's not. And I literally went to a hairdresser who I don't speak Spanish enough to tell him what I wanted. And he dyed my hair blonde. And it was not what I wanted. And I was like, I guess I'm blonde. And this is part of what we joke about, my husband and I. For those of you who don't know, I live in Mexico. I've been here about 18 months. That you sort of get what you get. There's so many things that aren't what we wanted, exactly how we wanted, but I'm blonde now. And apparently some of the ladies in here like it. So thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. I hope this is helpful for those of you who might be interested in working with me privately in the 8-week program that I offer. DM me and let me know. I think this is our year to be legendary. So if you're interested in being invited into that legendary space with the other women who I'm serving, let me know. Have a beautiful day, beautiful weekend, or whatever days might be ahead of you after you watch this video. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.